We started in Tarragona in 2003, which is just 5 years ago. And to tell the truth, we started because there was money to do it. In Spain, they started a program of quality PhD studies with big public subsidies to do it. We could bring in teachers from the outside, we could bring in students, we could teach in English, and that sounded like a great deal, so we started at that stage. Just for the students come from really all over the world. We're in Spain, but we're teaching in English, we're encouraged to teach in English, so we've had students really from all the continents, and from all the hybrid mixes of continents and cultural backgrounds, as one would expect in a field like translation studies. And that's been one of the great aspects of the program from my perspective. The teachers, we've had money to bring in teachers from wherever we want, and to pay them pretty well. So we've got what I think are some of the best in the field. Over the years we've had a fair range of the big names in translation studies. They come in, they teach in English, and so that's been really good as well. So-called harmonization in Europe means that in some countries you're doing doctoral studies with coursework, as we had it before here, and now in Spain, and I think about 25% of the countries to 30, we're not really sure, they wanted to divide it up. So the coursework is done as a master's, and then the PhD program is just thesis writing. So much for harmonization. Some countries are going down one track, other countries down the other. Oh, well, they're more local problems, but the grant structure. We can get grants for students to do their PhD studies for 4 years, basically, which is great, but the students have to come more or less straight from their undergraduate studies or straight from a master's. If they've got more than 2 years outside of the university system, they can't get the grant. Now, because translation studies is related to a series of professions, some of the best students come in with work experience, with more than 2 years work experience, particularly interpreters, people in the localization industry coming in with really good perspectives. And we can't give them grants because of this rule, which is based on the way things operate in the exact sciences, if you like. We have a very high dropout rate, attrition rate among students, but that's, I think, the same in PhD studies that are not based on students getting grants, although we've had students leave even when they're getting grants. The reasons are, I think, related to the profession. One girl doing very good research with a grant from us became a translator in Brussels with the European Commission. She gets more money there, she gets great work experience there, it's a great career development step. We're not going to compete with that. And you find that many of our students come in, they're professionals, they've got young families, and they're trying to do a PhD on top of that. It becomes too much, and something has to give. The one that gives is often the PhD, which goes on the back burner and might come back after they've had 2 children and have advanced to a comfortable level in their career. But, okay, on the other hand, those people bring in great work experience. So there's a give and take, at least with respect to that. Some students come in and they are, if you like, too professional. They'll come in and say, well, I don't really have to do any empirical research because I have all this experience of my profession. I know what the market's like. I know what best practices are. I'm going to tell you in my PhD thesis. And it takes us a lot of work to get through to them. No, we're doing research here. You're going to have to do some basic research methodology, get some data, formulate hypotheses, test the hypotheses, and not tell us what you're going to discover before you do the research. Okay, that's what we have the coursework for, to get through those very basic research methodology questions. Among the teachers, there are not real problems, but there are very different views. Firstly, of what translation studies is, but that's good, because I think students should see that plurality and be able to sort their own way through that. It's more at the level of supervision. I'm becoming very aware that there are different supervising styles. For some of our supervisors, it's a very hands-off approach. You know, let the student go ahead and do their work, just ask some questions along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas others have the tradition, I guess, some countries it's very marked, this student belongs to me. You are my student, you're going to apply my methods, my hypotheses, look at my research and continue that, and they're very protective of the students. Search methodology isn't different for translation. I mean, there are some specific aspects, but the basic methodology of doing empirical research is the same across the board. And I think students have to do that. In our program, students have to come in knowing they're going to do empirical research. In literary studies, or in linguistic studies, or in localization studies, I don't care what. It's still got to be empirical. The interesting thing is here, in Europe, we can say translation studies, and that's recognized as a place, at least, not so much a discipline, but an interdiscipline, so we can draw on other things. Here in the United States, there's a real problem when many people, many scholars out there who have worked on translation, really see it as a part of applied linguistics or social linguistics, because translation studies doesn't have a major presence here. And to come up and say we're going to do a PhD just in translation studies sounds like bravura more than anything else. It's not, because there's a strong European, Canadian tradition that can support it. But in this American context, it's going to be an uphill battle, I think.
Okay.
The first thing you can do is just make material available online.
Sure.
Okay, our program has pages of video material, which are lectures, which are interviews, which are whole seminars. They're free online. You can go in and use it. Nobody ever does, but it's there. Okay, so you know, it's no good just talking about it. You go out and do it. Put it there and invite people to come and use it. That's the first step. The competition also concerns ideas about what translation studies is. Okay, it's not gratuitous, for example, that in the introduction to this very symposium, it's posited that translation studies began in Leuven. Well, no, it didn't. It might have if you have a very narrow view of what translation studies is, but it's drawing on many, many different traditions. Or others who, as I said, will say, well, translation studies is basically applied linguistics. Well, it can be if you want, but that's not what the whole field is. So I think there's give and take there, there is competition there, and there should even be specialization there.
Right.
That some programs focus on one aspect and other programs on others. The students can go where they want according to what kind of translation studies they want to carry through. I should note that within the European structure now, and especially within Spanish law, joint PhD programs are possible within Europe. People in Monterey, within Europe, and there's public money available for that. But the degree of planning and organization involved is, I think, pretty prohibitive at this stage. Even things, it can start at master's level. But you have to work out problems like the different fees that are paid in different countries in Europe. There are solutions to these problems, but it takes a lot of work to get there. And I personally am so exhausted just getting my students enrolled, getting the students to a point where they're actually presenting PhD theses, and then trying to do some of my own research, that I'm going to leave that aspect of cooperation to other people who have more time and more energy than I do at the moment.